Sometimes it's hell getting to heaven.
Shawn Michaels vs. The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25 is not only considered one of the greatest WrestleMania matches in history, but many would say it's the greatest match that ever took place inside a WWE ring. WrestleMania 25, in the home state of both HBK and The Phenom, hosted the bout with around 72,500 fans in attendance to witness the battle between the light and the dark. It's pretty extraordinary when you think about where HBK and Taker were in their careers when this match took place. Shawn's retirement had been in the back of his mind, and while The Undertaker was ready to keep going year after year, he too was beginning to slow down. Many would say that Shawn and The Undertaker were not in their prime in 2009, with both guys having better years in terms of their overall match quality on a week-by-week or month-by-month basis, and the fact they were able to go out at WrestleMania 25, coming up to 25 years after both guys had turned pro, and put on such a career-defining match is something that shouldn't be overlooked. It proves that these guys aren't called legends of wrestling for nothing. It doesn't matter if you think The Undertaker was already approaching the end of his sell-by date, and it doesn't matter if you think Shawn Michaels was a pretty unsavory guy back in the 90s. When the bell rung to start the match at WrestleMania 25, HBK and the Dead Man delivered in the ring, and they showed a lot of the new guys, many of which were expected to carry the company for the next decade or two, how it's meant to be done. Today we're going to look at Shawn Michaels vs. The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25, and we're going to see why it's still considered as one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time. The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels have both gone on record to say they didn't care much about each other during the 90s. It wasn't the case of both guys disliking each other, they just weren't friends and they weren't close, even though both guys became main eventers as the 90s went on. Professionally, they'd do business together, but they wouldn't travel together or anything like that. In 1997, the two faced each other for the first time on pay-per-view at In Your House Ground Zero. They followed that up with the first Hell in a Cell match at In Your House Bad Blood a month later, and they also squared off at the 1998 Royal Rumble in a casket match. During the casket match, Shawn clipped his back on the edge of the casket, and it was this bump that ended up taking Shawn out of the game, forcing the Heartbreak Kid into early retirement and ending the career of the WWF's favourite degenerate. The Undertaker continued to thrive in the World Wrestling Federation while Shawn's life spiraled out of control, but by the time 2002 came around, HBK had sorted himself out and he was ready to make a one-off comeback. This one-off comeback led to a full-blown return to full-time wrestling, and while Shawn had to make a few changes to how he worked in the ring, many would say Shawn's second WWE solo run was better than his first. Taker too had evolved during this time period, from leading his own Ministry of Darkness to becoming the American Badass. Times had changed quite a bit during Shawn's downtime, but both men still adopted and both men remained as popular as they were in the 90s, even among a group of stronger, faster and younger superstars. Shawn and Taker knew they had something at the 2007 Royal Rumble, 2 years before their WrestleMania match. In the Royal Rumble match itself, the final two competitors inside the ring were none other than the Dead Man and the Heartbreak Kid. And the atmosphere in San Antonio that night was pure electricity. It's one of my personal favourite Royal Rumble endings. Sometimes in a Rumble, the last guy gets eliminated by surprise and it's a kind of blink and you miss it thing. Sometimes that's just done to keep the runner-up protected. But HBK and The Undertaker spent a good 7 minutes in the ring together, with both men trying to throw the other over the top rope. It turned into a match within the match, and even though hometown hero Shawn Michaels lost in the end, the fans went crazy for the final moments of the Rumble. The following year, at the 2008 Royal Rumble, HBK and the Dead Man started the Rumble match off. Shawn eliminated Undertaker this time just after the 30-minute mark, and Michaels then got eliminated seconds later. And from here, for the rest of the year, the two went their separate ways. The Royal Rumble in the Survivor Series was really the only time superstars from Raw and SmackDown could cross over and fight each other. There were exceptions, of course, but big interpromotional one-on-one matches, the real meaningful ones that usually involved main eventers, they only happened at WrestleMania, and the decision was made the following year to let Shawn and Undertaker have a one-on-one match on the WWE's grandest stage. Fans had been very receptive towards their Royal Rumble appearances, and of course, having two legends like Shawn and Taker working at WrestleMania against each other is just a no-brainer. Even without the Royal Rumble stuff, it still made loads of sense. In Storyline, Shawn accepted an employment contract from John Bradshaw Layfield. HBK had apparently fallen on hard times, and he gained financial stability from JBL at the cost of his morals. JBL wanted HBK to do his dirty work at the 2009 Royal Rumble. HBK would stand in JBL's corner and help him win the world title in a match against John Cena. So there was no meeting in the ring between HBK and the Deadman at the 2009 Rumble, although they did meet backstage. After JBL reminded him about what his job was tonight, HBK was confronted by the Deadman, and The Undertaker told Shawn that sometimes it's hell trying to get to heaven. This right here were the seeds getting planted for the Mania match, as hell and heaven would play a role in Taker vs Michaels. It was the underlying theme of the matchup. JBL didn't win the title at the Royal Rumble, and when the relationship between Shawn and Bradshaw went downhill, due to Shawn's reluctance to help his boss, the two ended up having a match at No Way Out 2009. If Michaels won, he'd get out of his contract with full pay. If JBL won, then Bradshaw would own HBK's name and likeness. Shawn won the bout and he was free from JBL. Bradshaw announced the next night that his next goal was to end The Undertaker's undefeated streak at WrestleMania, but Shawn interrupted Bradshaw to announce that he shared the same goal as his former employer. Shawn remembered what Taker said to him at the Royal Rumble, and Shawn said there was no one better to challenge the streak than Mr. WrestleMania himself. Michaels and Bradshaw had a match the following week. Shawn beats JBL, so Michaels was supposed to face The Undertaker. Only there was one more roadblock on Shawn's path to WrestleMania: Vladimir Kozlov. Yeah, I know, it's kinda random, isn't it? Kozlov himself was undefeated, so HBK had to beat Kozlov too if he wanted a shot at the Deadman. On the 2nd of March 2009 episode of Raw, Shawn defeated Kozlov with Sweet Chin Music, and after the bout, The Undertaker showed up. He didn't say a word, but Shawn got the message loud and clear. The next week, Shawn said he respected the Deadman, but he doesn't fear the Deadman. Streaks are made to be broken and nothing lasts forever. HBK gets interrupted by a video showcasing The Undertaker's WrestleMania victories, and then The Undertaker appears from behind HBK. Shawn says hello to the Deadman, and he says he's been expecting the Deadman to show up. It's a small thing here, but it's easily overlooked. Taker and Shawn knew each other so well that Shawn could feel his presence. And what's more, he wasn't intimidated by The Undertaker like many others would be. Taker returns the sentiment when he says he respects Shawn, but Shawn's ego has clouded his judgment. The Deadman has beaten many guys he's respected before, and Shawn will be no different. HBK says he wants to make something clear: he shouldn't have to qualify to wrestle anyone at WrestleMania. His accomplishments at the event are enough to give him the right to face whoever he wants, but Michaels says he's the showstopper, he's the icon, and he can't wait for WrestleMania to face The Undertaker. Taker reminds Shawn that HBK suffered some bitter defeats at the Show of Shows. HBK concerns himself with being the showstopper, beating the Deadman and ending the streak, but Shawn should be concerned about what The Undertaker will do to him physically and mentally. Shawn needs to be careful about what he wishes for, because he's gonna face the most dangerous entity ever to step foot in a WWE ring. Taker's then about to tell Shawn to rest in peace, but Shawn interrupts the Phenom by saying he'll rest comfortably on the evening of April 5th, because The Undertaker may have beaten all his WrestleMania opponents, but The Undertaker has never beaten Shawn Michaels, and he never will. Taker and Shawn then teamed up to take on Kozlov and JBL the next week on Raw. Taker was just about to hit the chokeslam, but Shawn stole the show by tagging himself in and stealing a victory. Taker chased Shawn back up the entranceway. He thought Shawn had disappeared behind the curtain, but Shawn reappears and Taker gets laid out with sweet chin music. The week after that, The Undertaker appeared on Raw and he said Shawn's right, the dead man has never beaten him. But the last time they did meet, Shawn ended up spending 5 years at home afterwards trying to recover from a back injury. At WrestleMania, Shawn's going to question his own faith, but Shawn has to remember that it was he who opened up the gates to hell. HBK's music plays in the arena, but Shawn isn't at Raw, he's at the graveyard. HBK says he kicked The Undertaker because that's how he stays on top for so long, by being one step ahead of his opponents. Shawn says that he standing in a graveyard may be seen as sacrilegious by some, but Shawn sees it as defiance. Shawn's standing in Taker's backyard and he has a surprise for the dead man. After talking about The Undertaker's past Mania victories and saying that the streak doesn't intimidate him, Michaels shows The Undertaker a grave, the grave of The Undertaker's undefeated streak. Michaels kicks down the headstone, he begins to bury it, and he says it's time for the streak to rest in peace. Two more segments I want to show you guys before we look at the match. The next one is probably the most memorable one of the whole build-up. SmackDown, March 27th, the Druids chant plays in the arena, usually associated with the arrival of The Undertaker. The Druids walk out and they're dressed in white, that was a little unusual. Out walks Shawn Michaels wearing white versions of The Undertaker's trademark hat and trench coat. The crowd pops when Shawn takes the hat off, and then he quotes the book of Genesis. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God divided light from darkness. He called the light day and the darkness night. Shawn says The Undertaker and he represent darkness and light. They've went down different roads throughout their careers, but they've also had many similarities. They're both at the top of their game. They've both been criticized and praised by their peers and the fans. But that's where the similarities end. Taker walks among the shadows, whereas Shawn thrives in the spotlight. Taker strikes fear into the hearts of his opponents, yet Shawn is unafraid. And when The Undertaker faces the showstopper, the undefeated streak will come to an end. The Undertaker then appears from under the ring. Shawn almost gets chokeslammed, but he gets out of the ring and The Undertaker's left there all pissed off. Jim Ross says a great line when he says Michaels could be flirting with disaster as HBK danced up the rampway while Taker looked on. On the next episode of Raw, a funeral was set up for HBK, but Michaels came out and he said this isn't his funeral, it's the funeral of The Undertaker and the funeral of the streak. HBK reminds the Phenom that he's never been able to beat Shawn Michaels, and what's more, there hasn't been a hint of retribution from The Undertaker over these past few weeks. HBK's been living rent-free in the Phenom's head, and HBK has gotten the best of The Undertaker ever since this challenge was made. Shawn says the day after WrestleMania, people will talk about the title matches, but the moment that's gonna last a lifetime will be when Shawn Michaels pins The Undertaker and ends the streak. The lights go out, we hear the casket close, The Undertaker's arrived, but Shawn's nowhere to be seen. Taker knows Shawn just locked himself in the casket, so he approaches it slowly, he opens it up, and there's no Shawn Michaels. Shawn was actually underneath the casket. Once again, HBK gets the better of The Undertaker. So, we arrive at WrestleMania, The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. Shawn had done a great job of pissing The Undertaker off and he showed everybody that he doesn't fear the Reaper, but still, the odds were stacked against HBK. The streak was as legendary as WrestleMania itself and fans didn't expect the streak to end. It was almost a foregone conclusion that The Undertaker wins at WrestleMania, but The Undertaker had to beat someone who he'd never beaten before in a one-on-one match. Shawn comes to the ring from the heavens wearing the white gear he wore on SmackDown. Shawn represents the light and he represents heaven. The Undertaker rises from the ground wearing his trademark black attire while flames fill the entranceway. Undertaker represents the dark and hell. Both entrances were fantastic and the entrances themselves created WrestleMania moments, but no one could have predicted how brilliant this match was going to be between two cornerstones of WWE. Fans expected something good, they got something legendary. So let's break down the entire match next and we'll see what happened. This is the part of the video where I remind you that I nor anyone else can do this match justice. You need to watch this for yourself and you need to experience it for yourself. Recapping the match in video form will never ever compare to watching the match from the entrances right up to the final bell. So please, if you haven't seen this one before, or if you're an old school fan and this one somehow passed you by, do yourself a favour and watch the whole thing. It's available on YouTube through the WWE's official channel. Take everything in from it, the guys involved, the moves they do in the ring, the atmosphere in the arena, the story being told, even the commentary is on point. The Undertaker wants to strike right at the beginning of the match. HBK knows what to expect, so Shawn ducks out of the way, and the WWE's greatest striker gets outsmarted. This happens more than once. Undertaker gets lit up, and it's the story of the build-up really. Shawn's one step ahead, just like he said he was with all other opponents. When Taker blocks a strike though, for the first time we see a little fear in the Heartbreak Kid. And how does Shawn reply when Taker nearly throws him out of the ring? He tells the dead man to suck it. Brilliant. He then jumps off the second rope and he feigns a knee injury, again staying one step ahead of the dead man. Michaels performs a Luthez press, but Jim Ross says the cat and mouse game has ended when Taker throws HBK into the corner and he starts laying in the right hands. This should be enough to knock that defiance out of Shawn. The Phenom brings Shawn to the next corner and the two trade shots. Half the crowd chants for Shawn, the other half chants for The Undertaker. Shawn takes the Flair corner bump followed by a huge back body drop, and now Taker's feeling a little more comfortable. Shawn gets rocked with a press slam and we see old school from the dead man. We think The Undertaker had Shawn where he wants him and it should be easy sailing from here, but Michaels dodges a big boot in the corner and HBK begins working over the knee. A knee breaker from Michaels gets followed up with a chop block, and then HBK applies a figure 4. Jim Ross brings up the fact that The Undertaker doesn't submit, but maybe Michaels is happy just to do a little more damage to the knee. Taker gets out by throwing more right hands. Shawn's wise enough to go straight back to the knee when both men get back to their feet, but he gets caught in a bear hug before getting rammed into the corner. It's a small thing, but look at Taker giving the knee a little attention before running to the corner. Shawn takes a punch in the mouth before Taker tries to get the circulation going again in his leg. HBK then takes 2 corner clotheslines before getting dropped with snake eyes. Shawn then takes a big boot, and Shawn may not fear the dead man, but that really doesn't matter at this point. He's having a hard time going toe-to-toe with his opponent. Taker signals for the chokeslam after hitting a leg drop, but Shawn wakes up and he pulls off a crossface. Again, Taker isn't going to submit, but it's doing some damage. Taker fails to roll out of the move, but he does manage to pick Shawn up and hit a sidewalk slam. He tries pinning HBK, but this match is far from over. Shawn dodges more Undertaker strikes, and it looks like Taker's a bit taken back by Shawn's offense. HBK then hits his signature flying forearm. He doubles up his offense with 2 inverted atomic drops, and The Undertaker gets floored with a jumping clothesline. Michaels decides to go upstairs for his elbow drop, but Taker sits up. Shawn says to hell with it, he jumps off the top rope anyway. Taker catches Shawn by the throat. Shawn counters and he feigns a super kick that makes Taker hit the mat. Shawn then goes for the figure 4, but Taker locks in Hell's Gate. The roof comes off the stadium, and this could have easily, very easily, ended the match. But Shawn makes it to the ropes and you can feel the crowd's excitement. That exchange was very good, but there was more to come. The two go out of the ring and Shawn gets his head slammed on the steps. Taker goes for a leg drop while HBK's draped over the apron, but Shawn moves out of the way and Taker gets hit with a baseball slide. Michaels then goes for a moonsault to the outside, but Taker swats him away and Shawn bounces on the floor. The two take a moment to regroup. Taker then gets in the ring and he goes for his dive over the top rope. Not going to get into it too much here, but that was reportedly Sim Snuka dressed up as a cameraman, and he didn't make another appearance again after this downright scary moment. Undertaker got knocked out, completely gone, and Shawn and the referee had to buy Taker time. It doesn't matter whose fault it was, people still argue about it. It sucks that Taker could have broke his neck right here, don't get me wrong, but the match went from exciting to absolutely gripping after this botch. Shawn gets in the ring and he waits. He then goes out to grab the referee, and Shawn argues with the ref inside the ring. HBK wants Marty Elias to begin the count, and it takes a little while for the referee to agree. All of this was done to give Undertaker time to recover, but the drama was completely on point. Taker makes it back in the ring and the crowd cheers. Shawn realizes that this is a chance. He tries once again to go for Sweet Chin Music, but he gets caught with a chokeslam. After the botched dive, many thought, including myself, that the guys were going to go home and this was the end of the bout. The referee does a big elaborate count, but Shawn kicks out at 2. The audience lose their minds. Undertaker can't believe it, but this match is gonna continue. The Tombstone. The Tombstone will end the match. Taker scoops up his next WrestleMania victim. Shawn jumps down. Taker sees the super kick coming and he blocks it. He goes for another chokeslam instead, but Shawn breaks free, and there it is, Sweet Chin Music. Shawn's done it, he's beaten the streak. HBK takes some time to cover the Phenom, and The Undertaker kicks out. It's absolute pandemonium inside the stadium. That's the third time fans thought the match was potentially over. Michaels looks more determined than ever. He walks over to the dead man, but The Undertaker wakes up and he grabs HBK by the throat. Shawn gets put in position for the last ride. He counters with a sunset flip, but Taker won't go down. The Phenom sets up another last ride. Shawn takes the full impact, but HBK still kicks out at 2, and The Undertaker's now showing his frustration. This is just impossible. Maybe thinking he has to pull something special out of the bag, the dead man goes for an uncharacteristic elbow off the top rope, but that was a mistake. Shawn moves out of the way purely on instinct. HBK then runs at Taker, but he finds himself flying over the top rope. He tries to skin the cat like he's done so many other times in his career, but what Shawn just did was give The Undertaker an easy opportunity to end this match. The dead man hits his signature tombstone piledriver, and that surely has to be the end of this bout. The look on Undertaker's face is one we had never seen before. Jim Ross screams he's having an out-of-body experience as the crowd goes completely crazy. HBK just kicked out of a chokeslam, a last ride, and the tombstone. Shawn also delayed quite a bit between hitting the super kick and pinning the dead man earlier. So all Shawn needs to do is hit one good super kick, pin Taker as fast as he can, and this one should be over. The streak was actually in jeopardy. Taker wants to make sure that doesn't happen. He signals for one more tombstone, but Shawn counters with a DDT out of pure desperation. He then drags himself to the corner, he climbs up slowly, and he hits the elbow drop, usually the setup for Sweet Chin Music. Shawn's been hurt badly, but he's in the corner and he begins warming up the band. They stretch this out a bit to build up the drama, and there it is. Michaels hits his finisher and he pins The Undertaker in good time. 1, 2, kick out by The Undertaker. The commentators are now screaming into their headsets as the crowd's excitement reaches absolutely ridiculous levels. The Undertaker is so dazed that he doesn't know where Shawn is, but the two legends get back to a standing position, and it comes down to both men throwing haymakers and hard chops. They're just throwing everything they have at each other because they don't know what else to do. They have given it their all, but they just keep fighting. HBK may have no fear, but Taker lives up to his best striker in the WWE name when Shawn eventually goes down. Taker goes for a tombstone, but he went for it a bit too early. Shawn's able to fight out and land a few more chops, and after getting launched into the corner, Shawn gets a boot up and Taker goes down. If Shawn's gonna win this thing, he has to be the showstopper. So he climbs up the ropes, he goes for a moonsault, but Taker catches Shawn out of the move. And once again, it's Shawn's athleticism that puts him in a bad position. We see another tombstone, and that's it over. 17-0 for the dead man. The Undertaker defeats Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25. False finishes are seen nowadays as a cheap way to gain quick excitement from the audience. What you have to remember is that this match right here took place when kicking out of finishers wasn't done all that often on such a big scale. And yes, of course, wrestlers had kicked out of finishers in the past and before this match, but it was all seriously amplified at WrestleMania 25 because of the streak. When it became clear that there was actually some danger of The Undertaker losing at WrestleMania, then those false finishes became all the more dramatic. Kicking out of finishers is par for the course nowadays, but this match right here was a masterclass in doing it right because you just did not know legitimately if the match was going to end. There was a sequence of moves that led up to the false finish. It wasn't a case of hitting a tombstone or a super kick out of nowhere and having the other guy just kick out. They built up every finisher attempt in a way that would end any other match. It's just an awe-inspiring bout at WrestleMania 25. You don't need to be a wrestling fan to appreciate the work both guys put in. And as mentioned at the top of this video, the fact that this happened so late in both guys' careers should not go unnoticed. There's a reason why Undertaker and Shawn Michaels are considered masters of their craft. They worked great with others, no doubt, but put them together and for some reason or another, they created magic. They did it in the 90s, they did it in the first Cell match, a casket match, Royal Rumble matches, but it was never better than when they stepped into the ring at WrestleMania 25 in Houston, Texas. So good was Taker vs. Shawn at Mania 25 that a rematch was booked for Mania 26, but that's a video for another time. I'll leave you with a quote from Taker and a quote from Shawn, and even if you sat through this whole video with me today, even if you've seen the match before, go and watch it again and I promise you, you'll be glad you did. The Undertaker said, "All I had to worry about that night was being The Undertaker. I didn't have to worry about Shawn and what Shawn was going to do because I knew he was going to be right there." Those are those kind of special nights that you don't have to think for your opponent. You don't have to come up with something. You know he's on the same wavelength as you are, and it was the perfect storm. I couldn't have been more happy with how that turned out. Shawn Michaels said, "I look back at things and I can be really critical of myself. There aren't many times I've come out of the ring where I haven't felt like, oh, I could have done something better. I could have changed this or I could have changed that. But that match, that's one that I don't know I can say that with."